The long-awaited, and some might even say dreaded, remake of Disney's Snow White is finally in theaters. This is a film that has been surrounded by a lot of controversy. I even made a whole video about just some of the controversies surrounding this film, like a year ago. And believe it or not, even more controversies came up since then. It became so bad that Disney ultimately decided to scale down the premiere for the film and only held like a small premiere for it, and not this big extravagant premiere that we've seen with other films and that you would expect from a high-profile Disney film. So I was definitely very skeptical when I went to the theater to watch this film, but I'm here today to say that it was actually pretty good. Yeah, I know, I expected to be disappointed by it, but I just wasn't. I actually had a really good time. In my last video, I talked about how I was afraid that the Lilo and Stitch remake was going to be just like a shot-for-shot remake of the animated film, but this was not that. They did tell the story in a different way. It was a new take on the story, but they did keep some of the, most iconic shots. Like, the shadows of the dwarfs on the mountainside and the queen running down the staircase with the cloak billowing behind her. Those shots were there, but I didn't feel like I was just watching the same film again. With that said, there were some additions to the story that made it a little bit too complicated for its own good. Like, it's kind of a simple story, and I do think there is room to explore the world of this story more, but this just became a little bit too complicated. There were some things that you just never really got to care about because they just felt unimportant and like they were there just to increase the runtime. I thought the overall look of the film was amazing. I really enjoyed the production design. I liked that it had kind of a cartoony vibe, a cartoony feel and look to it. And that is in a large part just because of the very high saturation on everything. It is incredibly colorful, this film. And this is actually a little bit of a deviation from Disney's original Snow White, because that was a lot more muted in the colors and had a lot more earth tones. But I liked it for this film, and it really worked for me. Another thing that helped to give it this cartoony vibe was that the animals in the film, the CGI animals, were not true to life. It wasn't like when you watch the remake of The Lion King, where it's basically like you're watching a nature documentary. These were Disney animals with large eyes and very expressive animals. And I definitely felt like that was the right way to go with this. Lean into the fairy tale and cartoon nature of this story. And I mean, that was also one of the biggest critiques of the Lion King film, that you just didn't have the same connection with the animals because they weren't as expressive as the 2D animated animals in the original film. So that was something I really liked. I also really enjoyed the costume design. I think they did a great job of recreating the costumes of the original film. Both Snow White's dress and the Queen's outfits were on point. And the elaborate set design of some of the scenes was also incredible. Really, really well done. I think the whole production design team, both costume designing and set design and everyone else, did a really, really great job with this film. Now, there was one point in the film where the cartoony nature, the cartooniness of Snow White's outfit took me out of the film a little bit. It is seemingly one of very few scenes in the film that is actually shot on location instead of on a set. And when you take Snow White in this very vibrant, very saturated dress and then put her in just a regular forest, she kind of stands out like a sore thumb. It becomes kind of like seeing Giselle in Enchanted when she arrives in the real world. But in that film, it's of course the point that she seems out of place. But all of the scenes that took place on these very elaborate sets, I thought worked brilliantly. There are some new songs in this film that were written by the songwriters of The Greatest Showman, and I thought they were pretty okay. I thought, yeah, they were pretty good, actually. Not like standout amazing, but they worked in the film. And that's, for what it's worth, I think that's what you can hope for in these films. In most of the Disney remakes, they've added a new song, and in general, I feel like the new songs stick out because they're kind of written in a different style than the original songs for the animated films. But I thought the songs in this film worked quite nicely. They weren't completely out of place. So that's good, I think. They also extended some of the songs from the animated film for this version. Both Hi Ho and Whistle While We Work were extended for this film, and I thought those songs worked really, really well. They were some of the best moments of the film, if you ask me. As well as the addition of new songs, they also added some new characters, and I'll get back to them later, but they were one of the main contributors to the fact that I felt this film was overly complicated. But we'll get back to that later in the video when I talk about the dwarfs and the supporting cast. Right now, I want to take some time to talk about Snow White herself, Rachel Zegler as Disney's Snow White. How did she do? I liked her. I thought she was good. But she was definitely different from the original animated Snow White. Zegler's version of Snow White is a lot more confrontational and opinionated.
You know, I really don't remember you being this opinionated.
And a lot less naive. And I think one of the places where you really see this in the film is when she finally meets the queen dressed up as the hag, who hands her this poisoned apple, and she ultimately eats the apple. In the original Disney version of Snow White, it is because of her naivete that she ultimately trusts the old hag and eats the apple. Whereas in this version, she doesn't really trust the hag, but she ends up eating the apple because she convinces her that she needs stamina to go save the prince. And that doesn't really say as much. That's just her being dumb and being tricked into eating this apple. That's not necessarily Zegler's fault. That's more of just how the character is written. But I do think that Zegler in general has a more confrontational vibe to her. With that said, I do think she is an amazing singer and she delivers the songs to a T, and I do think that she does a really good job with the role. There is one thing I want to mention though, because one of the things that Zegler said in an interview that kind of got her into some hot water was that this version of Snow White is not dreaming of a prince, but is instead dreaming of becoming the ruler that her father knew she could be.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be.
And that isn't completely true. It is true that she is not dreaming of a prince in this film, but she also doesn't dream of becoming a ruler of the kingdom. That is more of a byproduct of her wishing to get rid of the evil queen, who is not good for the people of the land. It's a little bit nitpicky, but I just wanted to mention that because I do think that there is a difference there. Now, speaking of the queen, let's talk about her next. The evil queen played by Gal Gadot. Now, while Gal Gadot might be a great choice for a character who only cares about her looks and for whom the looks are such an important thing, I don't think she was the right choice for this role. Mostly just because I don't think she's that good of an actor. I don't think she's good at being this cold, evil queen. And while I read that she is supposedly doing her own singing in this film, I cannot help but believe that that might either be false or she had a lot of help from some auto-tune, because when I watched the film, it sounded nothing like Gal Gadot when she was singing. Now, I talked about how they changed Snow White and made her less naive, and how that ultimately changed what the movie tries to say about her character. And I think they made a similar, slightly wrong choice with the Queen. In the original animated film, the Queen is driven to madness when the mirror tells her that Snow White is, 1, still alive, and 2, more beautiful than her. This makes her so mad that she deforms her own body and ruins her own looks in order to kill Snow White. That is why she becomes the hag, and she never becomes pretty again. She ruins herself in order to get back at Snow White. In this version, though, she disguises herself as the hag, but after she's killed Snow White, she turns back into Gal Gadot. And I think that lessens the impact and the morality of the story. Because the original was a story about how this constant and never-ending quest to become the most beautiful and the fairest of them all ultimately drove her to madness and killed her. It was her own quest to be the fairest of them all that became her death. And that's not really what happens in this film. In this film, it's more about, if we stand together, we can defeat the evil queen. And that's just not as powerful, if you ask me. All right, moving on from the queen, let's talk about the dwarfs. And maybe that's actually where we should start. I've talked about on this channel how they changed the title of the film from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs to simply Snow White. So they removed the dwarfs from the title, and they never actually call them dwarfs in the film. They're just these 7 weird dudes who live in a cabin in the woods. And I kinda like what they did here. They obviously wanted the 7 to look like they did in the animated classic, because that's what they look like. We have known this film since 1931, and they are such an iconic part of the Disney story as a whole. So they couldn't really look any other way. But they're also kind of a harmful stereotype and caricature of people with dwarfism. So in this film, by never calling them dwarfs and showing that they have magic powers and placing them next to a real person with dwarfism, they say that these are not supposed to be dwarfs. They're not supposed to be people with dwarfism. They're supposed to be fairy tale creatures. These are magical beings on par with mermaids or ogres. And I think that is an interesting take. I would obviously very much like to know what real people with dwarfism think about this portrayal and this take. So if you or anyone you know anything about this, please let me know in the comments down below. But let's just quickly talk about what they actually look like, because they are 100% CG in this film. My initial thought when I first saw them, both in the trailer and when I first saw them in this film, was that is a bit uncanny. But then as the film moves along and you start to get to know the characters and they start to interact with each other and with Snow White, you just sort of roll with it. I think it's ultimately fine and they are really well made. But remember when that set photo leaked of what people assumed to be this movie's version of the dwarfs, and it was just 7 people of differing heights and ethnicities. Those people are also in the film. So there is actually 2 sets of 7 helpers for Snow White. Yeah, this is where I thought the film became way too overcomplicated. Because Snow White leaves the dwarfs and then she meets Jonathan, this movie's version of the prince, and his helpers, this gang of 7 merry men and women. So we basically just go from one set of helpers to another set of helpers who are basically the same. They fill the same spot, but we just don't spend as much time with them, so they are never really developed and you just never really care about any of them other than like maybe one of them. So it seems completely unnecessary to have added this other gang of side characters. And also just why are there so many of them? You could have made the exact same story if Jonathan or the prince had 2 helpers instead, or maybe even none, because they don't really add anything other than needless complexity. But the one thing they do add is that one of the people in Jonathan's gang is a real person with dwarfism. So when he shows up and stands next to what we would have called the 7 dwarfs, it is clear that they are something different from him. He is just a human being with dwarfism, whereas they are magic creatures. So at least there's that. Alright, I've been talking for a while. Let's wrap this thing up. It may sound like I have a lot of critique for this film, and there are definitely things that could have been better. The plot is in many places paper thin, and you wouldn't have to push particularly hard to poke holes in it. It is overly complicated and Gal Gadot was miscast. But with all that said, I thoroughly enjoyed this film. I left the film with a smile on my face. It is a lot of fun. It is full of joy and hope and optimism. And I think most people, and particularly children, will have a good time with this film. They will most likely enjoy it. So there you have it. Those were my thoughts on Disney's Snow White. It's worth a watch. Now, if you've already seen it, I would love to hear what you thought about the film. And if you haven't seen it yet, are you planning on seeing it? Did I change your mind on it? Let me know in the comments down below. And while you're down there, feel free to leave a like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos from me. But with that said, that's pretty much all I had for you today. My name is Martin Riise. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care and so long.